on the absolute planet. Off you goes. G'day everybody, we are out in the shed today. It's an exciting time of year because the weather's beginning to cool and I'm starting to think about big cod throughout the Murray-Darling Basin. I've got myself a brand new Komodo 364 reel. I've also got a new swim bait rod and I thought it would be the perfect time to run you through how I like to rig my setups for throwing big lures throughout the Murray-Darling Basin. So I've been using the 364 Komodos for quite some time now and they're just an absolute powerhouse of a reel. Nice big power handle and just the big construction of the reel means that it's going to last the test of time. It's interesting with reels, when you go away for a week and you're doing full-on cod fishing for a week, it really shows the weaknesses in your reels, and the Komodos, they've just been fantastic. So it's a reel that I can really trust, great drag, and they just keep on going. So what I'm going to spool it with is I've got some 50-pound platypus bionic braid. For my bigger gear, I really like the bionic braid because it's got a little bit of stretch in it, and it's a braid that it's interesting cod fishing because it's actually really tough on your gear because it's not the fish itself, it's just the consistent casting over days where you may not get a bite. And any little weakness in your braid will come out when you get a really good strike. And I've just found with the bionic, it's a very tough braid, it's very long lasting, and it's just one that I can really trust to know that when I finally do get that really big bite, I'm going to stay connected. So if you follow the channel regularly, you know that I really like using the 801 heavy Komodo swim bait rod, but it's great now. They actually come in a two-piece, which is very handy if you're traveling. It just means that you can have a bit shorter rod, which is a bit easier to travel with. This locks nicely into there, and then we'll put our reel on. So I think my advice would be, if you are just planning on using your 364 for cod fishing, you may not need to fill the spool completely with braid, because really you're only going to use maybe the top 70 meters of line. So if that's the case, I would fill half of the spool at least with, you could just use some mono just to bulk it up. But I actually like using my Komodo for all sorts of things. They're great in the salt water. So I tend to fill up my whole spool with braid, and then if I go up north or somewhere like that and I want to use the Komodo say for jigging, I've got plenty of braid down to the bottom of the spool. So I'm sure there's lots of different ways that you can do this. This is just the way that I like to do it. So I get a line around the spool, which sometimes can take a bit of going. Just kink that braid to get it through there. Now I don't wrap it too much, I just go around once and then I do a 4-turn uni knot with the braid. Just doing 4-turn uni, 2, 3, 4. You don't really need to wet that, you can just cinch it down. Get that down onto the spool nice and tight. I'm just going to chop that tag off close to the spool, and then what I like to do, which stops the braid from spinning in the spool, is I just use a little bit of electrical tape. So you only need, I'm just going to put a fresh piece on there, you only need enough to do say 1 or 2 wraps around the spool itself. So I'm just going to use a piece about that long, and you can actually start the line on there a little bit and then put your tape over the top. You get 3 or 4 turns on there, and then just wrap it so that what will happen is that it just creates a really nice bed for your braid to sit on, and then you won't get it spinning around itself. Once you bulk the line on there, it'll stay nice and tight. So now that we've started that, we can start spooling up. When you're spooling your line up, I like to have it tight, just so that you know, if you pull really hard on a tight drag, you don't want the line or the braid to sort of wedge inside itself. So you need a good amount of pressure, but you don't want too much to give the reel too much stress. So I just like to have a nice bend in the rod, and make sure once you've done like a bit of winding, not too much, just make sure that it packs down nice and tight, and then you can just keep rolling. I'm just checking again to make sure it's nice and tight. All right, we are all loaded up. It's nice and tight, and we're just off the top of the spool. I like to fill it up, you know, pretty full, but not super full, because otherwise you'll end up with tangles. So there's two different types of leader that I like to use: Platypus hard armor tough leader, and then Platypus hard armor supple leader. The supple, as it says, is a bit softer, and then the tough leader has got a harder outer coating, so it's a lot harder wearing. Just depends on where you're fishing. I'd always prefer to go a little bit stretchy with cod fishing, because you get a better hookup. But if you're in some really gnarly country, definitely go with the tough leader, because it'll just, it just wears a little bit harder, and it might just save you from losing a really big fish. Anytime that I'm fishing with the Komodo, in the big water in the Murray, I always use a 100-pound leader, because the water's always quite dirty, the fish don't care, and a 100-pound leader will definitely land those 1% fish that always seem to get away. You'll catch 90% of your cod on a 60-pound leader with 50-pound braid, but every now and again you'll get a really big one that'll get off, and that's where you want your 100-pound leader. So now we need to get our braid attached to our leader. A few different ways you can do it, but I really like the FG knot. Super slim, travels through the guides really well, and especially if you're using heavy leader, it's a very good knot to use for that. Rather than run you through blow by blow with the FG, if you check the description, I've got a link for the FG knot video that I've done previously, so if you check that out, it's a really good one to be able to learn the FG. Alright, we've got our FG all rigged up, nice and neat. And with your FG, it's important to remember that loose wraps will actually provide a better knot than really, really neat, tight wraps. If you have slightly loose wraps, it means that it'll bed in very well on the leader and be really nice and strong. All right, now we have to get our leader length right. I never like to have my leader knot going through the level wind of the reel. So to measure it, I just pull off a bit off the spool, and then I just want to wind it down as if I've got a lure on the end. So we're going to end up about, say, 100 mil from the end of the, to the spool with the end of my leader. And then on this other end, I've just got it hanging like that. And I know once I tie my lure on, if the lure's hanging for a nice cast and my knot's there, I know it's going to be just perfect when I get out in the water. So that's where we need to chop our leader. So now I know I tie a lure on that end, it's going to be just right to be able to cast nice, rather than having that knot go on the reel, which can be a real problem. So I've got our three different types of lures. We've got large crankbaits, we've got topwater baits such as the tremor, and then also we've got spinner baits. Alright, so for a large crankbait that has a nice rounded toe point, so no sharp bits at all, I'll use a lefty's loop knot. So lefty's loop knot, simply we want to create a granny's knot. This is hard because the way that I'm holding it is a mirror reflection for you, so don't forget that. So we've created our half granny knot. We're going to go through the toe point of the lure, and then coming over the top of the knot that we made, we're going back through that hole, we're going around the main line a couple of times, and then we're going back through the center of the loop that we've made, and then the loop that we've just created by doing that, we need to go under and through that loop. Always wet your knots down. because otherwise the line will heat up and you'll create a weak knot. So that's our Lefty's loop knot. Great for lures that swim, and you want the lure to be as free as possible to swim the best it can swim. For topwater lures such as a tremor, because they have a fast catch clip, so fast catch clip is simply, we've got our toe point there. So because the clips allow the lure to swim freely, so lots of movement, all we need to do to attach to that clip is do a 4-turn uni knot. Now, a 4-turn uni knot is just it's just the strongest lure knot that I use. So all we need to do is going through the eye or through your clip, and then we're creating a loop. So we're bringing those two bits of line together. We're creating a loop like that and just going over and under 4 times. So you get that 4-turn 4 like that. And then always wet them down as you pull everything down tight. And although that's a very simple knot, it is just incredibly strong, and it's one that I really trust for both topwater lures. And because the spinnerbait is the same, so we've got our spinnerbaits here, because you've got the same setup and you want to tie tight to that, using the 4-turn uni knot is the go for your spinnerbaits as well. So there you go, bit of a rigging to get organised for big fish season down on the Murray-Darling Basin. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like it, leave us a comment, let us know if you'd like more tech videos, and I'll catch you all next time.